Hi everyone, welcome back to another tutorial on this channel. Thank you so much guys for stopping by. In today's video we'll be learning how to sew a Victorian corset with neat inseam finishing and a perfectly snatched waistline. If this is what you're looking for guys, kindly watch this video to the end, like, subscribe and don't forget to share. So guys, without wasting much of your time, let's get started. So guys, on the working table I have my pattern paper with the basic block partially drafted. So guys, I'll be explaining what each line represents, why I am highlighting, so that I'll be able to carry everyone along. Okay, so I've indicated the bust line, the under bust line, the waistline, and the lower part I have the hip line. Okay, you get to see that part much later. Then the center line, you can see there is the center front line. It represents no seam allowance. Okay, you can choose to use the edge of your pattern paper or just create your own center front. Okay, so for clarity I did that. Okay guys, so up above there I have my shoulder line, and I'll be marking the vertical measurements from the shoulder line. So I marked my bust line from the shoulder line, the under bust and the waistline. Okay, on the same shoulder line I went ahead to also establish my neck measurement and the shoulder measurement as well. Okay, the neck width is 4 inches, shoulder measurement is 7.5. okay, so you guys just know your own shoulder measurement and then divide it by 2 and mark it on your pattern paper. Then this is my chest line. Okay, the armhole establishes the chest line. I say this all the time, so I'll just quickly highlight the lines with my marker pen so that we can clearly see it. Okay, so you can see that I just used a pencil, so it might be faint enough for us to see the line, so I'll highlight it properly so that we can clearly see what we're doing. Okay, so guys, while highlighting this line, I want to use this medium to suggest for beginners to ensure that they have a clear understanding on how to draft a basic block. That is the beginning. There are tons of videos out there. You can go ahead and check it out. I also have a video on it. You can quickly check it out. Okay, so the next thing I'll quickly do is to get the midpoints of my armhole. What I'm trying to do is to establish my armhole curve. So after getting the midpoint of this line, I went in by 0.5. okay, so I will just use my pattern master to link it up to the shoulder line, and then I will use the curvy part to curve it towards the chest line. But before doing this, I will place the quarter of my bust circumference on the chest line. It's very important that you do so. It varies for different people, so just place the quarter of your bust line on the chest line. Then you go ahead to use these measurements to draft your armhole curve. Okay, this part is very important. Okay, make sure you place the quarter of your bust measurement on your chest line before drafting your armhole curve. Okay, so guys, what we'll simply do is to place our waist dart on the pattern. So the first thing to do before marking your waist dart is to place your bust to bust measurement, which is also known as a half bust span. So for me, mine is 8, so 8 divided by 2, I have 4 inches. Okay, so you go ahead and mark 4 inches there, and then you go ahead to link up this line from the bust line down to the hip measurement. Okay, so the next thing to do is to determine your overbust contouring, where you want your overbust contouring to be placed. Okay, so I'll be using the radius of my underbust to determine that. The radius of my underbust is 3.5. So if I want the Victorian corset rather to really cover my bust area, I will just mark 3.5 on that line, which is above the bust line. But for a little cleavage, I will just come down and mark 2.5 inches. So I made use of 2.5 inches there. So I'll just mark 2.5 inches to accommodate that area which is above the bust line, and then I'll link up these points together as you can see me doing. So guys, having done this, the next thing we'll do is to go ahead and place the waist dart. But before doing this, on the bust line, I'll simply come down by half an inch. So I'll just mark half an inch below the bust line. And then on the waistline, I'm going to be marking 0.75 on both sides. Okay, so please take note, 0.75 on both sides. And then on the hip line, that's the hip line, okay? I'll move up by 1 inch. It's optional. You don't have to do it. You can actually link it down without marking the 1 inch. So I'll just go ahead and connect it to the markings on the waistline. And then I'll link it up to the point, to the apex of the bust. Okay? I'll just link it up this way. Okay? So guys, we're good here. Okay? So I'll go ahead and contour the over bust, but before doing this, I would like to, draw attention to a particular method I felt that is also good to make use of. But I won't be making use of this method, but I just want to bring our attention to this, okay? So I'll be marking the midpoint of my shoulder seam, and then I'll link it up to the bust point, okay? Okay, so you could contour with this method. That's why I'm using a pencil first, because I know I wouldn't make use of this. So I'm going to be contouring with this line, with the shoulder line, by 0.75 on both sides. But the issue there is, for beginners, it may be a little bit challenging because there'll be need for you to blend because of gaping. So it may be a little bit challenging for beginners to make use of this process, okay, this method of contouring the over bust with the shoulder seam. There will be need for you to blend because it may not match. One may be longer than the other, okay? But I'll be applying this method. What I simply did here was to mark my half bust span on that line, which is 4 inches, and then I drew a straight line. So it's easier for me to contour here. So I'm going to be marking 0.75 on both sides. Okay, so using this method, you won't really encounter much challenge of blending or encounter a challenge of gaping, one part being longer than the other, okay, because it's a straight line. But the other one, which is a bit slanty, using the shoulder seam, it may be a little bit challenging as a result of gaping. So it's also good if you can blend. It's also good, okay? So I'll go ahead and contour this point, link it up to the bust line. As you can see, I made use of the curvy part of my pattern master, okay? So the next thing to do is to mark the horizontal measurement, but I'll be replacing the dart intake on the chest line or on the bust line, okay, to avoid shortage of fabric. We already have the quarter of a bust measurement there, so I just simply replaced the dart intake there. Then I'll go ahead and mark the quarter of my waist measurement, which is your waist measurement divided by 2, and then I'll replace the dart intake of 1.5. Then I'll also go ahead and mark the quarter of my hip measurement there, okay? So I'll simply go ahead and link this point together, as you can see. So guys, this is what we have. This is our regular bustier top, okay? So this is just simply a bustier blouse the way it is now, okay? This is just a bustier blouse. So I'll simply go ahead and contour the over bust, okay? I'll be contouring the under bust, okay? So what I simply did here was to mark my under bust measurement, okay, the quarter of my under bust measurement, and then I simply replaced the dart intake on that line, okay? So the difference there I have about 1.5 inches, okay? So I'll be making use of this remaining 1.5 inches to contour the under bust, to contour the under bust rather. So on the dart leg of the under bust line, towards the center front, I'm going to be marking 0.75 inches on both sides, and then I'll just simply blend it, link it up to the dart leg on the waistline. As you can see, I'll link it up to the dart leg of the waistline, and then contour it to the bust line. So right here, I'm utilizing the curvy part of my pattern master to contour it, to give it that bust-like curve towards the bust line. Now remember that on the bust line I came down by 0.5 inches. So guys, like I mentioned earlier, that this is simply a regular bustier blouse. You can simply attach a yoke, okay? Just drop the neckline of your choice for those who want to make use of a yoke, okay? So guys, the next thing to simply do is to convert this bustier blouse to a Victorian corset, and one of the steps to take is waist snatching. This is totally dependent on the amount of pressure you want to exert on yourself, on your stomach, on your body area, okay? So it varies for different clients, okay? So for this tutorial, we'll be snatching by 1.5 inches. We'll be making use of 1.5 inches reduction on the total waist measurement, okay? So I'll be using 1.5 inches. It is simply not a standard. You can snatch your waist by 2 inches, you can snatch your waist by 3 inches. It's just simply dependent on how much you want it, how much pressure you want to exert on yourself. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'll just simply do an illustration with 1.5 inches, okay? So guys, my waist measurement is 34 inches. My round waist measurement is 34 inches, and I'm going to be subtracting 1.5 inches from my total waist measurement. So having done this, what I got was 32.5 inches, okay? So I'm going to be dividing this 32.5 inches by 4, because as you can see, the pattern is placed on fold. And dividing it by 4, I got 8 inches. So guys, I'm going to be subtracting 8 inches from the total waist measurement we have on fold. So guys, the initial measurement we have on the waist on fold is 8.5. So 8.5 minus 8 inches, I have 0.5 inches. I hope we understand this part, okay? So I'm going to take it again. The initial waist measurement is 8.5 inches on fold, okay? So I'm going to be marking the new measurement here, which is 8 inches. The snatched measurement is 8 inches now. Then the dart intake there is 1.5, okay? So what we have remaining is 0.5 inches. So I have 0.5 inches left. So I'll be snatching the waist by 0.5 inches. Means I'm taking away 0.5 inches from the total waist measurement. So I'm going to be linking this waist reduction to the chest line and down to the hip line, okay? We'll get to see this, but because of the surface area, we're not able to cover down, but you get to see what I did much later as the tutorial proceeds, okay? So I'm going to shade this area, which is the snatched region, okay? So this is what was taken out from the total waist measurement, okay guys? So we're done here. The second step in creating converting a bustier blouse to a Victorian corset is placing your multiple darts. So this is dependent on you. You can go ahead and place as many darts as possible, okay? So just know that the more darts you place, the more will I say tedious the process is for you. So I'll simply make use of just one additional dart for this tutorial. So this is more like a standard for you to use and place as many darts as possible you want to use for your project, okay? So I just simply drew a straight line from the armhole. I just drew a straight line from the armhole line down to the hip line. On the waistline, I'll be going out. I will be going towards the center front and the side fronts by 0.5 inches. So I'll mark 0.5 inches on the waistline. I'll also mark 0.5 inches on the under bust line, and I'll simply go ahead and link these 2 points together, and then also link it up to the bust line and down to the hip line. Okay, we all know how to place a dart on our pattern, okay? So I'll link it down to the hip line. Just narrow it down to the hip line, 1 inch above the hip line, and then also link it up. Do the same, narrow it up to the bust line, okay, just like we did for the other waist dart. So it's a very easy process, okay? So having done this, what I'll simply do next is to replace the dart intake, okay? The dart intake I did for the multiple dart, which is this dart I'm touching particularly. I'm going to be replacing the dart. So your multiple dart is totally different from your waist snatching, okay? So I'll be replacing this dart on the side front. So I'll be replacing there by 1 inch. I'll be marking 1 inch, okay? and then I will link it up to the chest line and narrow it down to the hip line. So in other words, I'm incorporating the shaded area back into the pattern. I simply hope this is clear, and if you have any questions, as I said, we're all here to learn. Just let me know where you missed out and I would simply explain it again. Okay, so you narrow it up to the chest line. So like I mentioned earlier, we have incorporated the shaded area back into the pattern. So guys, this is it for this part. Okay, I hope we understand. Okay, this particular stage we've gotten into, I hope we all have a clear understanding here to this point. Okay, so the next thing I'll simply do here is to label it. It's very important that we label our patterns, label your panel. Okay, so that you don't miss out on anything. The process of cutting out, using your pattern to cut out on your fabric, you don't get it all mixed up. Okay, so you can see that I simply labeled it into 1, 2, 3, highlighting the center front, highlighting the mid front, and then highlighting the side front. Okay, so I'll simply go ahead and create the neckline of my Victorian corset. If I am not making use of a yoke, like I mentioned earlier, that I won't be needing a yoke for this tutorial, but if you're using a yoke, this part is simply not necessary. Okay, but I won't be making any use of the yoke, so I'll just simply come down there by 0.75 and then link it up just to create a neckline, more like a sweetheart neckline for my pattern. Okay, so guys, the next thing I'll simply do is to blend it, is to blend the armhole. Okay, to blend it, I'll just simply go ahead and blend this part properly. Okay, yeah, I think we're good here. Okay, okay guys, so on the hip line, okay, I'm going to be creating a curvy structure on the hip line. We all know that our regular Victorian corset has a curvy side area. Okay, so up down there, I'll be moving up by 3 inches, and then I'll curve it towards the front. I'll just curve it this way, curve it towards the center front, as if you're turning towards the center front, or not necessarily on the center front. So I'll just curve it. You can curve it a bit more deeper, it depends on how you want it. You can curve it to get towards the center front properly. Okay, so I just curved it a little bit towards the center front, not necessarily directly on the center, but I was tending towards the center front. So I'll go ahead and cut out the pattern, as you can see me doing. So this is all for the front pattern, and after doing this, we'll proceed to drafting our back pattern. Yeah, okay guys, so this is what we have for the front pattern. As you can see, this is what we have. This is what it looks like after the step-by-step process. Okay, so now this is the back. For the back illustration, we have the zipper allowance, and then we have the bust line, we have the waist line, and then we have the hip line. Okay, and then we all know this is the armhole curve, and then this is the chest line. So I'll just quickly label it CH, chest line. Okay, so guys, the next thing we'll simply do on the waistline, I'll simply move in by 0.5 inches, sorry, 0.5 inch. Okay, simply because if we want to incorporate a zip into your bustier blouse, there's need for you to do this. Okay, so I will just link it up to the bust line and then narrow it down to the hip line. Okay, okay guys, we're good here. This is basically for zip attachment. Okay, So the next thing we'll simply do is to place our back darts, the waist darts for the back pattern. So simply we'll do the same thing. From that point there, I'm going to be marking 4 inches, and I'll do the same. I'll mark the same 4 inches, which indicates our half bust span like we mentioned earlier. So I'll mark it on the hip line, and then I'll simply go ahead and link up these points together. Okay, I'm sure by now we're conversant with this process, having watched it in the previous pattern, which is for the front pattern. Okay, so just like I did for the front pattern, I'll be marking 0.75 on both sides on the waistline, and then I'll narrow it down to the hip line, and I also link it up to the bust point. Okay, and then link it down as well. Okay guys, so this is it. The next thing we'll simply do is to place the horizontal measurement. Okay, so we all know that there will not be any need for me explaining all over again the waist snatching process. I will just go ahead and place the measurement for the snatched waistline, which is 8 inches. Okay, I wouldn't want to repeat the process all over and over again. So the snatched waistline is 8 inches. So I will just simply go ahead and mark 8 inches on the pattern. Okay, I will mark 8 inches here, and then I will be replacing the dart intake of 1.5 inches. Okay guys, then I'll go ahead to also place the hip measurement, and then just link it up. Okay, on the bust line, you simply know it's the quarter of your bust measurement, so I'll just mark the quarter of my bust measurement right away, which is the same thing I'll be marking on the chest line. Okay, also incorporate the quarter of your hip measurement on the hip line. Okay, so I'll go ahead and connect these 3 points together. So guys, if you have watched today's points and you learned something from the tutorial, it has been able to add 1 or 2 to your sewing process, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, don't forget to like the video, don't forget to share, and most importantly subscribe. Please subscribe, encourage us so that we can make more videos. Okay, so guys, the next thing we'll simply do is the placement of your multiple darts. Like I mentioned earlier, you can go ahead and place as many darts as possible. Okay, so for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just be placing 1 additional dart, and just like I did for the previous, you draw a straight line linking from your armhole straight down to your hip line, and then we utilize this line for our second dart. Okay, so we're placing the second dart for the back pattern. So I just simply went towards the side and the side back and the center back by 0.5 inches. Okay, and I narrowed it down to the hip line and up to the bust line, as you can see. Okay, so the next thing to do is to replace your dart intake. Okay, so I'll just replace, just like I did for the front pattern, it's 1 inch there, so I'll just go ahead and mark 1 inch. So like I stated earlier, that your dart intake is totally different from your waist snatching. Okay, so I'll go ahead and replace this, and then I'll narrow it up to the chest line and down to the hip line. Okay, so just watch me. I'll be using the straight part. You can use a meter rule to do this, or your pattern master, whichever one you feel comfortable working with. Okay, so guys, having done this, I'll go ahead and snatch the back again. I'm going to be snatching, I'll move in by 1.5 inches. Okay, so this is me snatching the back pattern again by 1.5 inches. Okay, so doing this, I won't be replacing, there will be no replacement for this particular process. Okay, so I'm snatching the back again by 1.5 inches, and then I drew a straight line. Okay, so this line will be where I'll be attaching my loops. Okay, so as you can see, I'm just trying to make sure that we understand what I'm trying to say. Okay, so yeah, this is what we have here. Then just like we did for the front, I'll go ahead and then, okay, draw a I'll connect the chest line to the bust line. Okay, just link it up. Okay, I'll just link it up. Yeah, so this automatically becomes the neckline for the back. If you're not going to be using a yoke, it becomes your neckline, your real neckline for your back, linking your chest line to the bust line. Okay, so but if you want to attach a yoke, all you need to do is to do this. Just create a neckline of your choice. You don't have to, do this particular link it up this way. You can go ahead and create a neckline of your choice, and then this automatically becomes your yoke. It could be curvy, it could be a straight line, whichever one you feel comfortable working with. So just explore creativity when it comes to pattern creation, creating a pattern. Just be very creative at this point. So just like we did for the front pattern, down there I'll go upwards by 3 inches and then connect it towards the center back. Okay, so it can be deeper than this. Okay, it can be deeper than this. You can use the curvy part of your pattern master to create it towards your center back. Okay, so this is what I want for this illustration, and here we are. This is this back pattern for this tutorial. So guys, I simply went ahead to use this pattern to cut the main fabric and the lining, and as you can clearly see on the working table, the center front, the mid front, side front, center back, mid back, and the side back, okay, depending on the number of panels you created during your pattern drafting. So guys, you can choose to clearly cut your center front on fold, or you can cut it separately. So it all depends on what you want. If you want to create a boning channel on your center front, you can go ahead and cut it out separately. So what I'll simply do is to unpin this pattern from the fabric, as you can see me doing, and I'll open this up. Okay, so opening it up, you can see the main fabric and the lining. So I'm going to be assembling this pattern before sewing it. So I'll assemble it so that we don't miss out or we don't get things all mixed up. Okay, so if you want to actually do this without having any form of irregularity, I will simply advise that you follow this step that I'm doing. Okay, so I'll unpin the next pattern, the next panel, which is the mid front, and I will simply attach it to the center front using a pin. Okay, I'll first of all pin it up before taking it to my sewing machine. So I will just place it accordingly for the main fabric and also place it accordingly for the lining. So just watch me and I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to achieve. Okay, so I will just place it. I'll use my pin. Yeah, this is the pin. I will just place it this way. Make sure you align it properly so that you don't miss out on the bust points. Okay, so I will simply place it, use my pin to secure it. So note the seam allowance for this illustration, for this project, is 0.75. okay, so if you look at the pattern, you see that the seam allowance is kind of more bigger than the 0.5 regular seam allowance that I usually use. So for this illustration, the seam allowance is 0.75. So I'll quickly pin this up and then we'll proceed to the next stage. Okay, so right now I'm pinning the lining too with the same seam allowance of 0.75 inches. Okay, so the next panel to attach is the side front. Okay, so I'll pin the pattern from the side front and I'll go ahead to assemble it accordingly, just like I did for the previous panel. So I'll place it properly and then I'll use the seam allowance to join it. So firstly, like I mentioned earlier, I'll be using my pin first before taking it to the sewing machine, and this is what we have after using my pin to grip it. So this is the back pattern. Okay, so I first of all worked on the front pattern before coming to the back. So I'll be assembling the back separately from the front pattern. So I'll open the center back just like I did for the front pattern, the main fabric and the lining, and I'm going to be assembling it accordingly. The center back, the next panel is the mid back. So I'll join it and then I'll use a pin to secure it. Okay, so this is what we have. And then the next panel is the side back. Okay, so like I said earlier, I'm working correspondingly, working on the main fabric and working on the lining at the same time. Okay, so this is the side back. Okay, so I'll just simply place it accordingly. I'll place this on this side and then place this on the other side. Okay, I'll do the same for the lining. I'll place this on this side and I'll place this on the other side. So yeah, we're good here. So I'll just use my pin to secure it. Okay, so guys, I've done it. I've used my pin to secure all the panels accordingly. So this is the front, the lining for the front, and then this is the main fabric. Okay, so I'll just take this to my sewing machine and then I'll stitch it by 0.75 inches. All the gripped points, okay, of the panel, I'll just stitch it by 0.75. So I'll do this off camera and then I'll bring it back for us to see what we have done so far. So guys, yeah, this is it. These are the panels. This is the front panel, this is the back panel. So I'm going to be placing it this way. I'll place the other one this way, okay, and then I'll take it to my sewing machine and then I'll stitch it. Okay, I'm going to be stitching the sides together. Still, I'm going to be stitching by 0.75 because that's the seam allowance for this tutorial. Okay, so choose what you want to work with. If you feel comfortable working with 0.5, this is not a standard, it's okay, but I had a reason for using 0.75, so you can choose to work with me if you wish. Okay, so I'll do the same for the lining as well. Attach, join the back to the center front. Okay, so guys, I've done it. As you can see what we have, this is the seam allowance for the pattern. I'll go ahead and stitch it up, like create a boning channel with the seam allowance by 0.25 on both sides. I hope you understand. I'll just stitch the end, create a boning channel using the seam allowance by 0.25. okay, yeah, so this is it. I've done it. I've joined, created a boning channel, and guys, we can clearly see what we have. Okay, so I'll flip it to the other side for us to see it properly. Okay, so you can see how I stitched it. Okay, ensure that you iron your seam allowance before doing this. It's very important. Okay, so that you have a very neat job. Okay, so I'll turn it to the other side. Okay guys, so this is what we have. So the next thing I'll simply do is to insert the boning channels through the piping, insert a plastic bone inside through the boning channel. Okay, so I'm placing this up for us to see the seam allowance, how I was able to achieve this. You can see the seam allowance on the fabric, 1/2 inch above and beneath. Okay, so by the time I insert this, I'll be rest assured that I have a seam allowance of 0.5 inches above and a seam allowance of 0.5 inches beneath. So I'm going to insert this particular one and show you guys what I really did. Okay, so I'll insert this, okay, and ensure that I have like 1 inch from that point where you can see my hand. Okay, so I have like 1 inch above, so I'll go ahead and use my scissors and cut it. So by the time I push this in, I'll be having like 0.5 inches above and below. It will enable me to close up the upper parts and the lower parts. You can decide to reduce it by 1.5 or 1.25, okay, but 1 inch is just clearly okay for me. So I'll do the same for the other part of the bustier. You know, we have like 2 boning channels for each point, okay, for each panel or for each joining. So like I clearly explained for the other one, 1 inch, when you insert your boning channel, leave at least 1 inch before you get to the top and then cut it off, so that by the time you push it in properly, you have like 1/2 inch above and 1/2 inch below. Okay, so I've done majorly for the bustier and you can see what we achieved. So guys, I'm going to be explaining to you the challenges I faced while placing these boning channels this way and how I was able to overcome it. So just keep watching and learn from my mistake. Okay, so I simply use the boning channel for the other side. Now you can clearly see how the Victorian corset is pointing outward. It's not relaxing properly, and by the time I flip it to the other side, you can see that it's well relaxed. Okay, so it's wrong for you to place it in that direction. So for the bustier part, I will just simply remove the boning, plastic bone, and then turn it to the other side, so that by the time I place it on my body, it can relax properly. So I'm going to be placing it this way, because if I place it the other way, to be sticking out, it won't relax properly on my body. But when I place it in this direction, it will relax properly. I hope we understand the point I'm trying to make. Okay, if you don't understand, please just let me know. But just simply place your boning channel in this direction. Okay, to help you save a lot of stress, or save you from altering your project, or kind of feeling so bad about your sewing project. Okay, so I also do the same for the other side. Okay, I'll remove the plastic bone and insert it in the other direction. So majorly for the bustier area, I'm not going to be flipping for the other part, the other joining. So for the bustier area, I'll just take it out and then flip it, so that by the time I place it on my body after sewing, it will be relaxing, it will grip properly. Okay, I simply hope you understand. So guys, I'll quickly do the other one, and then we'll proceed to the next step of the tutorial. Okay, so yeah, turning to the other side, you can see that it's curving this way. Okay, so we're good here. The next thing I'll simply do is to place my loop. Okay, I'll be placing the loop before closing it up. So I went ahead to prepare this strip I'll be using to create the loops. Okay, it's not difficult to create the strips. I'll simply explain what I did here. So I'll get one strip and explain to you guys what I actually did. Okay, so for this strip, I cut out 3 inches. Okay, you can choose to do 2 inches if you want it a bit smaller than what I have on my working table. It depends on what you want. So I cut this by 3 inches, and I will just place it on fold like this, and then place it inward on the fabric, not outward. Please place it inwards, and then I'll stitch it. Okay, so the distance between one loop to the other is 2 inches for me. You could do 1.5 depending on the number of loops you want to create. So between 1.5 and 2 inches is perfectly okay. Okay, so I did 2 inches for this tutorial, and I left half an inch above and beneath. Okay, this is very important, so that by the time you're closing up your neckline, you won't have any issues. Okay, to be easy for you to do it. So I actually placed my loop on both sides, simply on the main fabric, and then I used the lining to close it up. So place it right sides facing each other, take it to your sewing machine, and you stitch it up. Okay, so I'll take this to my sewing machine. I'm going to be running a stitch off camera, and then I'll close up the sides as well. But I'll close up the neckline first, the upper part, and let you guys know what I actually did afterwards before closing up the sides. Okay guys, so I've closed up the neckline, okay, and then I top stitched. Okay, it's very important that you top. If you don't top stitch, you have issues. Okay, so I'm going to open this up for us to see what I actually did. So after stitching, I flipped it up to the lining, and then I top stitched so that the neckline can relax neatly. I hope we can clearly see what I'm trying to explain. You top stitch against the lining, not against the main fabric, please. You top stitched against the lining. Okay, so by the time you turn it, it will be relaxing it will relax properly. Okay, you won't have the seam allowance sticking out. You won't have the lining sticking out. Okay, so after doing this, you use your iron, give it a good press for it to properly relax. Use a steam iron to do it, to achieve this, so that you get a very relaxed finishing here. Okay, so having done this, I'll still flip this back, okay, to complete the closure. I'll flip it back. Okay, so I'm going to be closing the sides, so I'll place this, and then I'll stitch it by 0.5 inches. Remember that I attach the loops by 0.25. So this time around, I'm going to be closing the lining on the main fabric, right sides facing each other, and then I'll stitch it by 0.5 inches. Okay, so I've done it, and then I'm going to be flipping it to the other side. I've turned it. Okay, so this is what we have after turning it. Okay, so the next thing for me to do is to close up the lower side. So it's not a difficult thing, just turn it inwards, and then you top stitch. turn it inwards. You turn the lining inward, turn the main fabric in. So guys, I'll take this to the sewing machine and top stitch the lower parts, and then we're through with the Victorian corset tutorial. So guys, if you find this video so helpful, please like and share. Most importantly, like I keep highlighting, please subscribe to our channel, encourage me, support me so I can make more videos. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for stopping by. Thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for your encouragement. I'll see you guys in my next video. Have a nice day.